So we have reached our final lesson of Unit 2, the European Enlightenment. And if you were absent today, if you can please click on this, and you will see there are two rectangles. Now, this looks like a typo, but it is not a typo. I know it's class 41, but we are continuing yesterday's assignment. So if you've been absent for 2 days, you have double duty. I just said duty. But if you only missed today, you have 4 or 5. And what I mean by this, 1, 2, and 3, that was yesterday's class. For number 4, we watched a video from Mr. Richie, and I appreciate Mr. Richie and Mr. Heimler, two teachers I consider excellent, and I think they're good resources for you. And then the number 5 part is looking at the PowerPoint and my lecture on the Enlightenment. What key themes can you glean? So again, if you've missed 2 days, you have 5 items of business. If you've missed just today, you have 2 orders of business. And then we will hit up our reviews tomorrow. But that's for tomorrow. And as for today, the Enlightenment. All right, so this light bulb. If you've watched cartoons, I'm a big cartoon fan, and you've seen in cartoons somebody has a really good idea, a light bulb emerges above their head. And I think that's appropriate because the Enlightenment was a really bright idea. It was a good idea. It was an intellectual and philosophical movement that dominated the world of ideas in Europe during the 18th century. Okay, so let me go over part 4 with you, the Mr. Richie video. Now, Mr. Richie used a graphic organizer to compare the two. So the scientific revolution came first, okay, from Copernicus to Newton, whereas the Enlightenment came after the fact, okay? So a 17th century phenomenon compared to an 18th century. Now, the scientific revolution laid the foundation to what became the Enlightenment, okay? It was built on this foundation of thinking the scientific revolution laid down. Now, during the scientific revolution, people were doing science for the sake of science. Scientific inquiry was done just for the sake of science, whereas in the Enlightenment, the scientific thinking had a tangible direction to change and reform society. And the scientific revolution was not a challenge to the social order. At least it wasn't deliberate. And obviously Galileo ruffled the feathers of the Catholic Church. He didn't mean to do it. Whereas the Enlightenment is an intentional antagonism to the powers that be, that we want some changes. So that's the graphic organizer. There's the link for the video if you need to watch that. Okay, which brings us to number 5, our final part of our assignment, the Enlightenment. So instead of giving you a straight lecture about it, I want to use some primary sources of what Enlightenment philosophers said and see if you can get the general vibe of this. So here's Spinoza. Be not astonished at new ideas, for it is well known to you that a thing does not therefore cease to be true just because it's not accepted by many, which is great. Goes against the bandwagon fallacy. Just because it's popular doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's good. John Locke, maybe the most influential man on what became our Declaration of Independence. That's a pretty fair argument. And he said, education begins the gentleman, but reading good company and reflection must finish him. And I think his point's well taken. Formal education's great. It's a starting point, but having those great conversations with people, reading good books, being introspective, reflecting on what you can do better, that's real education. So that's John Locke. David Hume, here's me visiting his tomb, Hume's tomb, that rhymes, in Scotland, one of my heroes, and he said, a wise man proportions his beliefs to the evidence. Okay, believe in something if there's evidence for it. So there's me paying homage. Rousseau, although modesty is natural to man, it is not natural to children. Modesty only begins with the knowledge of evil. So what he's saying by this is that when you're a child, the possibilities are endless. There's, you can do anything. And what happens if we lose that? Meaning, you know what? Let's try to keep some of that and see and reach our full potential to dream big, to think big. And I think that's where Rousseau's coming. Adam Smith of the USA, little else is requisite to carry a state to the highest degree of opulence from the lowest barbarism, but peace, easy taxes, and a tolerable administration of justice, all the rest being brought about by the natural course of things. So what this means is, hey, you want to make people happy? I'll tell you what, if they have some money in their pocket and some food in their belly and it's peaceful, things are going to work out. Try to achieve that, which is a fair point. Voltaire, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Absolutely, Voltaire. I could not agree with you more. And if you look at history, atrocities were committed by people who believe in absurdities. By the way, you're not going to believe in absurdities if you use scientific lenses, if you use evidence. You're not going to be looking at or believing in absurdities like some other people may do. Wollstonecraft, English. A slavish bondage to parents cramps every faculty of the mind. And I'm not saying go against your parents, and I don't know if she's saying that automatically, but I think what she's saying objectively is, as an adult, we have the luxury of looking at our childhood and say, wow, that was really good. I'm going to keep that. I don't care for that. I'm going to lose that. Because if you're only going to copy what your parents have done or who they are, you're not going to be your authentic self, which I think is a fair point. Considering I'm talking to a room full of teenagers, I think it's even a fairer point. Okay, Thomas Jefferson, the man that wrote the Declaration of Independence, and these famous words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Okay, Enlightenment principles is what America was built upon. Our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, our founding fathers, okay, including one of our most important ones, Jefferson, were Enlightenment philosophers. Okay, Von Goethe, a person hears only what they understand. And I think if anybody's been in an argument recently, I think they can understand this. But again, once people have a deeper understanding of things, they're going to be able to hear things more objectively and more clearly. Okay, so anyway, I wanted to give you a little primary source flavor of Enlightenment thinking. So anyway, the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was a movement of philosophers that emphasized the following things. Reason. Be reasonable in your thinking. Think things through. Don't just go on knee-jerk emotion or superstition. Reason things through. Liberty. Hey, do your own thing. Be free. As long as you're not bothering other people, you do your own thing. Progress. How can you get yourself better? How can you get your community better? How can you get your country better? How can you get your world better? Get better, better, better. That's progress, right? Tolerance. Being open-minded to other viewpoints. Being open-minded to other people. Fraternity, brotherhood, connections with other people. Constitutional government, that governments are for the people and that there's rules set up, rule of law that everybody follows. And separation of church and state, that government and religion should be separated. And if you look at history, theocracies don't end well. If people have the power of God, they tend to abuse the power of God if you use history as your guide. So these Enlightenment philosophers said, hey, they should be separated. Okay, and if you knew anything, or excuse me, if you know anything about the divine right of kings and absolutism of the monarchies of Europe, you can understand where they're coming from. So how does this apply to today? Reason, liberty, progress, tolerance, fraternity, constitutional government, separation of church and state. That's the last list on the last slide. But again, you look at modern times. If you look at right now, we all have a choice of how we want to live. Do we live reasonably? How do we achieve the most freedom in our life? How do we progress ourselves and our world and our people? Am I being tolerant? Am I being open-minded to different viewpoints? Do I have my group? Do I have my team? Do I have my brotherhood, my sisterhood? Am I being involved in constitutional government? Am I voting? Am I making good choices in that area? And am I valuing the separation of church and state? Okay, now politically, you could look at our politicians, and some do better than others, and we all have our opinions, but you can definitely look at the ones you like and say, yeah, they probably do these things. And the ones you don't like so much, they probably don't help in these areas. So anyway, part of this broader construct is this idea of the European miracle, that within a couple of centuries, Europe goes from backwater, behind, really not a place you want to be, bubonic plague, the whole nine, into a lot of a strong position, hegemony. And if you combine the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Enlightenment with the scientific revolution, some historians, Jones in particular, coined that the European miracle. In a sense, one of the most backwater, worst places in the world becomes a very powerful thing. But they have some common things. Renaissance, enjoy life. Live life to the fullest. Reformation, literacy, enlightenment, that list I just showed you, all good stuff. And then the scientific revolution, understanding science, valuing science. So that's the broader construct. All right, so we are done with Unit 2. We are done with Chapter 7, and we will start our reviews. And I do it plural because we'll do the multiple choice, and we'll do some LEQ stuff and get you ready for the test in the springtime. So anyway, thank you for watching.